Yep, to the yep. You already know what time it is. It's your girl P.O.C. We are back live on 900 AM WRD, 96.1 Word Radio each and every Friday. You already know, start your morning off with us here on Eco Word, bringing you that greener, safer Philadelphia conversation. Today is Friday, April 12th, and you already know we got a jam-packed show for you. Yes, you. For our second half of the show, we have an amazing guest. I'm excited to talk about this. We just realized we were at the same place at the same time, but we're on air again at the same place at the same time. So I want to welcome Evlondo Cooper to WRD, who is Media Matters Climate and Energy Senior Researcher. Welcome to WRD. Welcome to EcoWord. Good morning. How you feeling?
I'm feeling real good. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
For sure. I want you to go ahead and properly introduce yourself so people know exactly who you're listening to, for sure.
Yeah, my name is Evlondo Cooper. I work for Media Matters for America. I'm a senior researcher on the climate and energy desk.
And when it comes down to media matters, that's actually like something that people in my position, we say it all the time. Media matters, but for you all to take it and run with it, and create something so much bigger surrounding the topic that media matters. How does it feel to be a part of that journey?
Yeah, it's a great organization. It's been around for um, about 20 years now, almost 20 years, if not 20 years. And the work we do primarily as an organization, we're a nonprofit that focuses on um, looking at how the media covers a range of issues, pushing back on conservative misinformation and disinformation. And in particular, my team, we look at mainstream coverage of climate change. We look at how climate change is covered on social media, the disinformation space around that, and climate denial. And we just push for improved and better climate coverage across the board.
And it's crazy, how brought the conversation in. We were at the same place at the same time.
Yes,
You were actually at SEJ last week, and we actually had some folks from SEJ come on to really talk about and do a recap last
I
week
love
about how
that.
the conference went. So to have you on this week is exciting because you actually did a workshop, a panel about disinformation and misinformation. So when it comes down to the topic, how do you feel like the audience there, as far as the journalists in that space and who really covers that beat, received that conversation?
Yeah, I think it went really well. Like it was a broader panel about the need to improve environmental justice coverage across the board, and it's particularly with regards to impacted communities. So we had advocates and activists from from communities in Philadelphia, in and around Philadelphia, who have been harmed by pollution impacts. We had a thought leader and advocate to speak about ways that the journalists in the room could improve their coverage, and we had a journalist on the panel who also helped to develop the panel, talk about pushing back against disinformation, misinformation, and giving other tips about how they can get to the heart of some of these stories,
Mhm.
especially with these big pollutant companies trying to spin people and deny information and obscure access to transparent information.
For sure. And I feel like, personally, and this is a personal question I would love to get your opinion on.
Sure.
When it comes down to this whole disinformation, misinformation conversation, I really feel like it started in that Donald Trump era when he, kept shouting out fake news, fake news. And it was really hard to find a trusted source. At one point, you thought Fox was the end all be all, CNN was the end all be all. And now you start to question these things. And more people are going on YouTube to get the information now. They're watching these 60-second shorts and they feel like they're the smartest person in the room. So when you think about disinformation and misinformation and how it actually even started as far as the conversation, how far back would you say it started as a researcher?
Yeah, in the climate space in particular, Trump just kind of slid into a space that had been already created
Hmm.
for him, right? Uh, there have been great journalistic stories by journalists documenting the billion-dollar effort plus effort by the fossil fuel industry to undermine support for climate change and undermine support for climate change solutions. People don't remember this. I'm a little bit older, but in the Bush era, and we can debate the efficacy of anything that would come out of that administration.
Hmm.
But in the 80s, there was general consensus about climate change, climate science, global warming, and the need to do something about it.
Hmm.
Now in 2024, we have an entire party, and I don't, but we have an entire political party that is dedicated to undermining climate science and dragging their feet on climate solutions. And
And when you
so
say we have a
that
dedicated political party, what party are you talking about, if you don't mind
the
addressing?
Republican Party.
Okay. We got to put it out there. You know what I mean? We got to,
We put it out there.
this is an election season. You feel me? We got to talk about
Yeah,
it.
no, that's very fair. But yeah, so you have the Republican Party, which is you know, put itself in opposition to climate science and climate solutions. So when we talk about disinformation in that space, it was the actual industry pushing that misinformation about climate change in order to keep its bottom line padded. And going forward, they want to be a partner in that space. And that's why a lot of our critique of media coverage has to be holding the industry accountable for driving much of climate change and environmental injustice, and um, demanding that they're the ones that are held accountable and part of doing something to fix the problem that they created
Hmm.
in large part.
And when it comes down to what your program is doing and what your what the initiatives from your organization, how are you all advocating for better coverage on climate and energy issues?
Yeah, I mean, a huge part of what we do is we collect the data, right? I mean, for our broadcast studies of climate coverage and environmental justice coverage, we review all the coverage for an entire year for ABC, CBS, and NBC.
Hmm.
Throughout the year, we also do extreme weather studies to see how they're covering like climate in discrete moments when people are paying attention. Um, my colleague Lana Berger does a lot of work in the online space around greenwashing and other efforts by industry folks to downplay or pivot away from the harm that their products are causing.
Hmm.
So we collect all this data, and then there are spaces where we can kind of push toward what we'd like to see. We want to see, and a lot of what other journalists want to see. We want to see more diverse voices discussing climate change and environmental justice. We want to see
Talk about it.
better coverage connecting the impacts to climate change, and a bunch of other things that we kind of push for programmatically that we think would improve coverage immediately,
For
and we share
sure.
this with them as well.
And one thing that you just said that stood out to me is like the diverse voice, really
Yes.
pushing forward for all communities to step up and really talk about how their environment is affecting them and affecting their zip codes or affecting the people that live in their zip codes, primarily in these Black and brown cities. Walking into SEJ last week, it wasn't a lot of Black and brown journalists in that room, to really talk about the issues in which they live in. I met a lot of rural journalists who are stepping
Yeah.
up and talking about issues that are going on in their environments. And I appreciate that. But in these big urban cities, we also have so many things that are affecting us day to day. And, finding that voice to really talk about it, I think that we do have to have more organizations like yours to really even focus on the data for us to say, there's room for us to talk about these things. Because some of us feel like we don't have room at the table or even a seat at the table to talk about these things. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think, my purview professionally is looking at, big media companies, cable and broadcast. But we've also been pushing, and the part of what was discussed during our panel presentation was the need to provide information to non-white media outlets. WRD's been doing a good job for years on this. And this is
Appreciate
a
you.
model we'd like to see replicated across Black radio stations, Black networks across the country, because a lot of people in these communities, this is who they trust to get their news.
Mhm.
It includes Hispanic, across the board. They trust people that are in their communities, that are giving them the news every day, that are, you know, providing them with entertainment in some instances. And
Mhm.
we think that that's a perfect space to begin networking, to encouraging these folks to include climate coverage, environmental justice coverage, because Black and brown folks want to hear this stuff too. It impacts them first and worst in a lot of instances, and they don't
Agreed.
have the resources they need to recover after storms or to
Agreed.
relocate when their neighborhoods are being polluted. So we think there's a lot of space to continue to push the big networks, the corporate networks, to improve their coverage. But part of what I would like to see is opportunities to share this message with non-white media outlets and have them begin incorporating this coverage into their programs as well.
No doubt. And while you're doing the work, there's still so much coverage that is being done. There's so many
Oh
things
my
that are
God.
still being limited as far as what is being shown to the public, how much
Yes.
information is out actually being let out to the public, such as like the situation that's going on in Louisiana. So that makes me want to ask you, as far as like the challenges that you all face, trying to get this information out for people to actually take it serious and want to continue to push the information forward versus just talking about it in a newsroom and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, we can point to, not just us, but a lot of let's talk about climate change in particular.
Hmm.
We've seen, although we saw a dip this year in climate coverage, we've seen climate coverage improve over the last 10 years we've been doing the studies. We used to just look at if they mentioned climate change, we would give them credit for that segment. But now our studies evolved to kind of understand many different ways that they're talking about climate coverage, including in some instances understanding the concept of climate justice and what that means for frontline marginalized communities.
Hmm.
So we've seen some improvement there. It's not nearly where it needs to be. And again, even that coverage is missing those crucial voices from those communities, talk about what's happening to them, and also be a part of the conversations about solutions going forward. So we still do need to see a lot of work on that. And as far as environmental justice, there still needs to be a lot of work helping the networks understand and develop a lens for understanding what an environmental justice story is. Cancer Alley is a big story, and that gets a decent amount of play,
Yeah.
when Flint, but the problem I have now is that these things are often siloed. There is for instance, a water crisis in this country
Hmm.
in poor Black and brown communities, rural communities. There are sacrifice zones all over the country where these industrial accidents, like what you saw in East Palestine last year, this is happening day after day in communities all across this country. And so instead of just talking about these things as discrete events, there needs to be a kind of understanding that this is an industry that
Yeah.
is deliberately choosing to sacrifice the air, land, and water of people all across our country, people who don't have a voice. And that's the role of the media, to be the voice for the voiceless, to hold powerful industries accountable and demand change on behalf of the most marginalized people.
And that's why we have people like you here on WURD. And don't forget, each and every Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., you can tune in here on WRD 900 AM, 96.1 FM. And I want you to go ahead and reintroduce yourself and tell the people how they can find you, social media, website, all that good stuff. Also how they can find your coverage at the same time. We have about 5 minutes left before I get to my last question.
Of course. Again, my name is Evlondo Cooper. I work for Media Matters for America. I'm on the climate and energy desk. You can find me at Evlondo Cooper on Twitter. Pretty easy to find there. And
You still
if you
call
go
it
to,
Twitter. I love that. I love that because people keep calling it X, and I'm like, it's Twitter, people. But
I
anyway,
can't
keep
wrap my
going.
head around it.
Me
One day I'll get
either.
it right.
But keep going. What else can
um,
they find you at?
you go to MediaMatters.com and go to the climate and energy page, and you can find not only my work, but the work of my great colleagues as well.
For sure. And I want to ask you about the difference between environmental justice and climate change, right? Or climate issues or climate action. I feel
Sure.
like when it comes down to environmental justice, it's a different topic of conversation, specifically because I see what we deal with every day here in the city of Philadelphia, and it becomes environmental injustice. I mean, sorry, become
Yes.
environmental injustice when the things that we're facing every day. So when we talk about climate action and climate issues, I feel like, yes, we can talk about the trees. Yes, we can talk about the birds. We can talk about the wildfires. But like you said, what about the water issues that we're dealing with within our elementary schools, the asbestos issues that we're dealing with, the factories in which a lot of our grandparents live around and it's causing them to have early cancer stages. These things that we're dealing with as Black and brown folks are just people who are living in these urban neighborhoods. So when you think about the topic of climate change and climate issues and climate action. And then we have this topic or this beat of environmental justice. I feel like people try to merge them so as if it's one, but in its reality, it's different or it's two different subjects. And I wanted to hear your opinion on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it best. Climate change rightfully commands a lot more media attention, a lot of media attention, um, because you get the impacts like extreme heat, extreme wildfires, storms, things of that nature. When I think about environmental justice, I think about the decisions being made
Yeah.
about who is going to bear the brunt of that. So redlining, what communities are going to be placed in these dangerous flood zones whereas sea levels rise, they're going to be washed away first and
Mhm.
not have the resources they need to adapt or recover from that. Like you said, where are the factories being cited that is producing the pollution? Whose neighborhoods are being chosen to deal with these impacts to their air, land, and water? You know, there are a lot of right now in indigenous communities, the
Mhm.
mining, you know, they have precious resources that we need. You know, we're going to destroy their land in order to extract what we need to continue our kind of capitalist endeavor, whether it's through clean energy or other things. So
Mhm.
I think, yeah, I think climate change is kind of the overall effect of producing these greenhouse gases and these impacts, these scientific impacts that are going to happen and become increasingly hard to underpin, because once you start fooling with the systemic nature of climate, we don't know where those impacts will specifically land and how they'll land.
Mhm.
But the choices of who are going to be placed in greater harm right now and in the future, those are kind of environmental justice stories, because those have to do specifically with governments and decision makers deciding we're gonna put a factory on your land, we're not gonna clean up your land, we're gonna poison your air, land, and water, and not do anything about it
But
on
when we
behalf of
push
industry.
But when we push the conversation forward to talk about these issues, as far as like the coverage that we're talking about, um, how do we make sure that these things are also being talked about, right? Everything that I just named, everything that you just went over, how do we make sure that journalists, understand that these little things create the story surrounding the climate issues, that creates the budget, that puts it into the communities, that makes the solutions, you know?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I mean, I think locally there's a lot of great reporting being done. I think if people want to see these stories on their broadcast news, I think they need to put the same kind of pressure that a lot of groups have been pressuring them to do a better job of covering. Use the data produced by organizations like mine and others to
Hmm.
demand changes in how they cover these issues, demand more and better coverage, demand certain voices go on there. And I do think a part of that solution has to be relying on news sources that these communities trust the most, and get them involved in learning if they don't know how, showing them, giving them the resources and the data they need to cover these stories. And if they do have that already, then encouraging them to begin understanding that their audiences want to hear about climate change. They want
Hmm.
to hear about environmental justice. They want to know how they can be involved. And so I think those three things are very powerful ways that people can not only be informed, but become engaged and being a part of the solutions as well.
And I think that that breaks down to, the small, the little people, the farmers, the agriculture, those type of folks also who deserve respect when it comes down to talking about the issues that they deal with, because if there's a wildfire, that means a farm is burning, if the
Yes,
farm is burning, that means
yes.
the agriculture is down. The agriculture is down, that means there's more food deserts. So there's so many just, ripple effects that affects all of these things when we talk about climate change. But I'm going to ask you this last question before we go. And I appreciate you again for coming through this morning here on WRD, blessing us here on EcoWord. But you keep mentioning data, right? And when you talk about data, we talk about these numbers, and the numbers that you're collecting is from like ABC, CBS, NBC, things of that nature, those type of
Sure.
affiliations as far as traditional media outlets. What are they doing when they actually see these numbers, though? You compile the numbers, you give them the research, you show them what's going on, you show them what their listeners are thinking, or what they want to hear. But when they get it, how are they receiving it? Like, what are they actually doing? What is the effect that's coming from it?
From my anecdotal experience, I will say that although everyone wants to see better coverage, we have seen an improvement in coverage. And even in this year's study, we try to uplift good stories where we see them. It's the carrot and stick approach. And I think it's been effective. I think everyone wants to I think we've seen a little bit of a sea change in as far as they are recognizing that their audiences, right? People know, like you said, farmers, people know something's going on. They maybe
Hmm.
can't explain it, or they have an explanation that might be unscientific, but they know in their bones that something is different, and they want to know how they can preserve their lifestyle, or where it being, and protect their families. This is across the board. We're seeing polls show that even majorities of Republicans want the government to take action on climate change.
Hmm.
And so part of it is just being responsive to your audience, being responsive to the data that we're putting out there, and just learning how to tell these stories in a better way, a more informed way. And we have seen some progress on that front. just there's just a lot more to go, and we're running out of time.
For
Frankly.
sure. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you for, being relatable and transparent here this morning. I think what we had as far as a conversation, a lot of people can take back with them and actually start to go look at the data themselves to see what they want to do with it as far as journalists, reporters, or freelancers who are really covering this beat or really have the passion to see what's going to happen as far as a greener future. So I thank you so much again. Please, again, shout yourself out, tell the people how they can find you, and also find more coverage. And also, if they want to check out the website, how can they do so?
Evlondo Cooper, Climate Energy Desk at Media Matters for America. Evlondo Cooper on Twitter and MediaMatters.org. You can find our climate page there as well and read more of my writing, and as well as my colleagues as well.
For sure. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. You already know, each and every Friday live, 900 AM WRD, 96.1 Word Radio. Stay locked 10 to 11 AM on WRD Eco Word. We'll be back next Friday. Radio's up.